that he said that when he came to the Corinthian church, because the Corinthian church is not the most depraved society,
right?
Of that time. He said that he came with fear and trembled.
No eloquence of speech and much trembling.
Right.
I'm going to actually talk about that tomorrow morning.
Let me ask a question, not to stay longer and give it away, but when Paul was coming from Athens, right? He was coming from Athens, the intellectual apex of philosophy. Let's ask a question. When he strategized how to approach Corinth, and the answer is in the text, what was his strategy?
He said, I decided not to know anything among you except Jesus Christ and the crucified. And then he goes on, this is 1 Corinthians 2, verses 1 to 5, and he goes on to say, when I was with you, I was with you in fear and weakness and in much trembling. And he did not have eloquence of speech. And he did that on purpose, so that people may see and it may be demonstrated that wisdom and the power of God comes from above, and it comes from the Word itself.
But at the same time, we must understand that the one who changes the heart is God. And that is where our trust is. That is where we finally rest in His sovereignty, in Him saving and changing the hearts. Nevertheless, we are called to be a conduit, right? And it is said that either God will work either through us or in spite of us.
And that's what he did with Moses in Exodus chapters 2 through 4. God sent Moses to go before Pharaoh and the Jewish elders, and Moses was filled with excuse after excuse why he was not the guy for the job. And finally, you look at, there's so many excuses that he gave in the midst of that, but one of the excuses was he says, I'm not an eloquent man. That's what the Apostle Paul said as well. But he said, I'm not an eloquent man. Neither formally nor since thou hast spoken to thy servant. In other words, Moses threw a litmus test out there, and he said, listen, I believe that you can grab a hold of somebody who's not very eloquent, and you can make him eloquent, but you have not made me eloquent. You called me to go do a task that requires eloquence. I can't do this. And then God said, that this was the final excuse that he had, and then finally, God said, who made man's mouth? Who makes the dumb dumb, the blind blind, and the deaf deaf? And you strip that down to the bare bones, and what you see, and this is dealing with God's sovereignty, that God has created every man, woman, and child exactly as He sees fit. With deformities, without deformities, blind, able to see. In John chapter 9, we described a man born blind. Who sinned? Was it this man or his parents? Why is he like this? And Jesus said, neither sinned, but that the glory of God, that the works of God may be made manifest. He's like this for such a time as this. The handicap that you have is strategically and specifically placed by God like the hair on your head. That's the way it is. Quickly, this is just really good and really important, right? We didn't plan on talking about this. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. That's what's right before 1 Corinthians 2, 1 to 5. So that nobody touches His glory. God will not share His glory with anyone. So God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called, the best abilities, availability. So those people who are not going to touch His glory are the people who He's going to use. So we go, I have these handicaps, these excuses, and they're legitimate, and they hold us back. 13 of the 14 judges found in the book of Judges in your Bible all had a handicap. They all had a legitimate, genuine handicap why they should not have been a judge. And God used them. We look at our handicaps as stuff to hold us back. God says, your handicap is a gift from me to push you forward.
The Apostle Paul, speaking to the church in Rome, said these words in chapter 10. He said, "For everyone who calls the name of the Lord will be saved."
Amen.
Right? We all say amen to that. But behind that statement comes the responsibility of the believer. Listen to what he says. Verse 14, he says, "How then will they call on him in whom they have not believed? And how are they to believe in him of whom they have never heard?" Now the logical question to this statement is, how? Now the answer to that question is, rather, by what means? The answer to the question is, and how are they to hear without someone preaching? Therein rests the reason why we're here today. Therein rests our mission. That is, that God in His sovereignty did not decree the beginning and the end, but He also has decreed the means by which He will bring this to pass. The Apostle Paul also wrote to the Corinthian church in first letter at the end of chapter 1, he said this, "For God has chosen the base things in the world, things that are considered as nothing, things that are considered as foolish, to shame the wise and the strong, to confound the wisdom of man." And then he pleads with the church in Corinth to consider their calling and say, "Consider, not many of you were wise according to human standards. Not many of you were of noble birth." What is the point? He has chosen us to be the vessel, the vehicle, the conduit, the precious gospel of Jesus Christ. There's no higher calling. There's nothing beyond that. He has chosen each one of you to be His representatives, the representatives of the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Brother Mark,
I have a great difficulty being in front of people, and I gave a glimpse of that last night. I wear special t-shirts that gather my sweat, and they're called Thompson tees. I keep them stocked inside my closet. I read books on how to public speak. I read books on how to interact with people, how to have a simple dialogue with another individual. It looks like I'm getting eye contact with you, but I'm not. I'm looking right here at your foreheads. But it looks like I'm looking right at you, doesn't it? I was in Wendy's a while ago, wanting to take my girl, Ella, to a special daddy-daughter date. And I wanted to take her to someplace a little bit more special than I normally take her, so I took her to Wendy's. And as we're looking up at the dollar value menu items, there were a group of college-age students that came inside the restaurant. They were dressed really nice. The guys were in business suits and the women were dressed the same. I grabbed my Frosty and my fries, and just before I walked over to my table, I asked one of the gentlemen, I said, "Why are you dressed so nice?" He said, "Well, we are part of an epidactic debate team. We just came from a mock trial. We're all practicing to be lawyers. We travel around the United States and we debate people on subjects of trending and current events." And then as if he was gazing into my soul, he looked at me and he said, "We debate anybody, any subject, at any time, and we will do it at any place." I was like, "Oh, get a hold of yourself." Now, I kind of debate for a living, and knowing that, I looked at him and I said, "Oh yeah? Well, good luck with that." And I walked away. I went and I sat down with my girl Ella, who's not here, and my girl Eden is here. But my little girl Ella, as we're sitting there, she looked at me and she said, "Daddy, you got to share the gospel with them." I said, "Peanut, you best mind your own business."
And one of them had blasphemed really loud and said, Daddy, you got to go share the gospel with them. I said, honey, Daddy's really nervous. And you know how nervous Daddy gets. And I don't have enough gospel tracts for everybody. She said, that's okay, I do. I have my own personal stash in the car. Of course you do, my little homeschool princess. We made our way out to the car, and I said, Daddy's so nervous, I think we should pray. And she said, Daddy, there's a time to pray and there's a time to move. I grabbed the gospel tracts and went on inside the restaurant. I went over to them and I said, hey, listen, my little girl, Ella, right here, whoa, where did she go? I said, baby, what you doing under the table? She says, I'm scared. But you can do it with God's help. Something I share with my kids all the time. I said, listen, my little girl, Ella, and myself, we want you to have one of these. And I held up a $1 million bill gospel tract. It looks like a $1 million bill on the other side if there was such a thing. And on the other side, there was a Christian message. And I said, hey, listen, this tells you how you can avoid hell, come into a relationship with your Maker, and make it to heaven. You can have one or you don't have to have one. It's all okay with me. It doesn't matter. But I want to make sure that you know that there's enough for everybody. I started to hand them out. And I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments where something starts to come out here, but it did not originate up here. Because right before I walked away, I said, so you debate? Let's have a debate. I said, who's the head of your debate team? And they pointed over to this girl. Her name was Dakota. She levitated over everybody. I came down in the midst and she stood there. She said, what would you like to debate? And this is what she said. Well, what do you want to debate? And I said, well, how about whether or not Christianity is true? Whether or not Jesus is the only way to the Father? Whether the Bible is correct? She said, pick one. Now, the Bible tells us as Christians that we are to be ready only 2 times. That's in season and out of season.
Amen.
And she was ready in season and out of season to talk about the different nuanced areas and directions of Christianity. And she was an atheist. I said, okay, well, let's talk about whether Jesus Christ is the truth. She said, okay, great. You go first, and I'll follow up. We'll do a little back and forth banter. We'll let the jury decide who won. I'm like, wow, she has done this before. And I said, great, all right, well, let's do that. So I went first, and we went back and forth for about 30 minutes. I looked over at her, and I said, you get the final word. And she didn't say anything at all. She was just silent. And I was reminded of the words of the late, great apologist, Greg Bonson, who said, it is not our job to open people's hearts. It's our job to close their mouths. And when you